Perek Lamed Ches, on Daf Nun, Amud Aleph, or page 182 at the bottom, the Rebbe begins saying that although the main kavanah for which the neshama comes down into this world is in order to be mesakin, to fix the nefesh habahamis, the animal soul, and not for the sake of the godly soul, and that's why the act of the mitzvah, or the articulation of the words of davening, of benching, of Kriyat Shema, is essential, because that's how we involve the animal soul in the act or in the speech, which is also considered an act. Yet, the sages tell us that one who davens or makes a bracha without kavanah is like having a body without a neshama. Which means that doing the mitzvah without kavanah, so the act of the mitzvah is like the body of the mitzvah, the kavanah of the mitzvah is the neshama of the mitzvah, and to do a mitzvah without kavanah is like having a body without a soul. Generally we assume, and we understand this to mean, that the mitzvah without kavanah is like a dead body. A body without a neshama, meaning a dead body. But this couldn't possibly be the meaning after the Rebbe explained the greatness of the act of the mitzvah, the body of the mitzvah, how really it is the main kavanah, and it is through the act of the mitzvah that we become a vehicle for godliness and make a dwelling place for God in the lower world, more so than through the neshama and the ava and the yira and the kavanah. So it can't mean that the mitzvah without a kavanah is like a dead body, which is a totally useless and unholy thing. Rather, it must mean that the mitzvah without kavanah is like a body that is alive, but it doesn't have the excitement, it doesn't have the depth of a neshama. And this is what the Rebbe is explaining by explaining the difference between the body and the neshama, or the nefesh, within every created being. We're on Daf Nun, in the middle of Perek Lamed Ches. The line begins, Kol Chai. ואף שבשניהם עד אחד שווה בבחינת הסתר פנים. Now, although the body of the created being and the nefesh of the created being are equal in that the light that gives them existence, the light of God that gives them existence, is equally concealed. Ulevushim shovim, and they have equal garments that conceal. That the godly light that is creating both the body of the created being as well as the nefesh of the created being, that light is concealed, hidden, and clothed equally. How do we know that they're both equally concealed? By the very fact that they belong to the same world. They belong to Elam Hazeh. That which makes a world, what separates this world from a higher world and so on, is the degree of concealment. So everything in this world has the same amount of concealment, which is why they belong in the same world. Generally speaking, the concealment of the life and the light that comes from God's breath, so to speak, is generally concealed b'bechinas hester ponim, in the hiding of God's face. And the light and the life comes down through the chain of worlds, from level to level, with great concealment and many concealments, until it is clothed not only in a garment but in a klipa. A garment is more delicate, more edel than a shell, than a husk. In this world, the garment is not only an ordinary curtain, as the Tzimtzum is sometimes described in higher worlds. Here, what conceals the godliness is a klippa, a shell. It's klippas nega lahachayes klolos elam haze hachumri, which gives life to this world in general on the level of a mundane physical existence. Which includes all those things that are permissible and pure or not unholy in this world. In other words, those things that are neutral, coming from Klippas Nega, they're neither mitzvahs nor sins. So the Rebbe is saying that in terms of how concealed God's presence is, the body and the nefesh of a created being are equal. Because the nefesh is also part of the created world, and therefore it too is receiving its life and its energy and its existence through concealments. Which means in a practical sense that just as when you look at the body of a vegetable, you don't see godliness, in the same way, when you look at the nefesh of the vegetable, in other words, the fact that it grows, you still don't see any godliness. Godliness is not more revealed in the growth of the vegetable than in the body of the vegetable. Either way, the thing appears to be on its own, independent, God forbid, of a creator. So in terms of concealment, the nefesh and the guf are equal. But as he will say later, concerning not the concealment of godliness, but the actual presence of godliness, concealed or otherwise, how much godliness is actually invested in the various creations of this world, here there are great differences. But what they're equal in is that no matter how much godliness is invested or how little godliness is invested, it is all concealed and hidden. One doesn't see it. Umimenov al yodo, and it is from this klipas noiga, and through the klipas noiga, mushpoyim dvorim hatmeim, those things that are completely unholy also receive their energy through the permissible. Kihi bechinas memutzas kenal, because as we learned earlier, klipas noiga is the bridge, the intermediary between holy and totally unholy. So everything must receive its life from Kedusha, but in order for the energy to be siphoned off by the totally unholy klippa from holiness, there has to be an intermediary between them. And that intermediary is klipas noiga, the permissible klippa. Afal pikein, so in spite of this, in spite of the fact that all things in this world are equally concealed in their existence, that they don't feel or they don't reveal the fact that they are created by God and they seem to exist by themselves, still, this ray of godliness, which is drawn down to give life and existence, through this garment and concealment, the light is not equal in all of them. The light that comes through concealment, the light that is concealed, is not equal in all of them. The bechinas tzimtzum v'hispashtus. In the area of contraction and expansion. In other words, in certain creatures, in certain creations, the godly light is more expanded, more developed, and in others it's less developed. In some, it is more contracted and doesn't have the same effect. It doesn't permeate as thoroughly and as completely and so on, whereas in other creatures, the godliness that is there affects it more deeply, permeates more, and is more expansive, as, for example, the difference between the inorganic, the stone, and the human being is that in both cases, the stone as well as the human being deny, by their very existence, deny their creator. On the other hand, the godliness that is present in the stone is obviously not equal at all, infinitely lower than the godliness present in a human being. The human being has growth, which is a godly thing. The human being has mobility, which is a godly thing. And the human being has intelligence, which is a godly thing. So there is far more godliness. Godliness is far more expressed and permeates more of the human being than it does in the stone. So that the human being is more godly than the stone, even though it conceals its godliness just as effectively and just as well as the stone conceals its godliness. So that although they are all equal in the concealment, in the hester, but they are not all equal in the tzimtzum. In the higher creature, the tzimtzum is less because there is more godliness present, whereas in the lower creature, there is less godliness present in the first place. And even that is concealed as the higher creatures conceal their godliness, and the lower creature conceals its godliness. In the same way, the nimshal of the statement that a mitzvah without kavanah is like a body without a soul, the body without the soul means that in each there is an advantage, that although the revelation of godliness in all mitzvahs are equal, whether it's the kavanah or the act, both of them are obvious godliness, unlike, or the opposite of, created beings, where all created beings are equally concealing godliness. Every mitzvah, every aspect of Torah is equal in that it reveals godliness. So that the kavanah of the mitzvah doesn't reveal more godliness than does the act of the mitzvah, since both of them are what God wants, and in God's will there is no distinction. On the other hand, there is a difference in the tzimtzum of the mitzvah. In the kavanah, there is less tzimtzum, because the godliness is more spread out and permeates through more of the person. Whereas in the act of the mitzvah, the godliness is constrained and limited to the act itself and to that part of the neshama and that part of the body that involves itself in an act, but not in the rest. So although it is revealed, there is no concealment there at all. It is obvious godliness, but it is less godliness than in the kavanah. And in the kavanah, the godliness is obviously revealed, as it is in the act of the mitzvah, but in addition, there is also less tzimtzum. The godliness is also more obvious, in that it permeates more of the human being into the inner garments and so on, because we're talking here about a person who is doing the mitzvah and having the kavanah. We're not talking about a kavanah without a mitzvah. That's nothing. There's nothing to even discuss there. But the mitzvah with the kavanah is more godliness, not necessarily more revealed, because godliness is revealed wherever it is, and all mitzvahs are equally godly. But here, there is a greater expansion of the godliness than there is in the act of the mitzvah alone. Gimel Nissan, in the Hayom Yom, the day after Beis Nissan, the Rebbe writes that my father, the Rebbe Rashab, used to have the following shiurim. Every day he would study a parsha of Chumash with Rashi, and he would say Tanakh by heart. Then he would study one chapter of Torah and Nevi'im and Ksuvim, and then one chapter of Mishnayos. Then he would study a Shir Gemara for 2 pages a week, a thorough study, a deep study, and he would also study a more superficial study of 3 pages of Gemara a day. So he would study 2 pages a week in depth and 3 pages a day just for familiarity. He also had a shir in the Yerushalmi, and also a shir, although it wasn't every day, in Halacha. And in the course of a year, he would conclude also the entire Medrash Rabbah. The longer Sedrus, where there was more Medrash, he would leave incomplete. He would borrow time from those Sedrus, and he would make up for it on the shorter Sedrus. Where the Medrash is shorter, he would make up and catch up on the longer Sedrus where there was more Medrash Rabbah.